Charleston Teacher Alliance, headed by Jody Solomon, sorry, Jody, front row, and the School of Education, Health, and Human Performance at the College of Charleston. Welcome to tonight's Charleston County School Board Candidate Forum. We're so glad to have candidates here giving up their time to share their insights with us. Thank you also to all of the Charleston County teachers and College of Charleston teacher candidates who submitted questions over the past couple of weeks. We had between 50 to 60 questions submitted for the candidates tonight, and we culled them down and pushed them all together so our candidates can answer at least 10 of those tonight. They'll have a chance for a 1-minute opening and then 10 questions. And we're also glad to have tonight TJ Phillips from 92.5 FM to moderate for us. So without further ado, TJ. Thank you.
Okay, as he just explained, we will have questions for each, and we're lucky enough to have all but one make it tonight. Everybody accepted. Traffic and parking, he may be outside. We don't know yet. Okay, running for 2 East Cooper seats, we have Kate Darby, Joyce Green, Sarah Shad Johnson, and Jake Rambo. Running for 1 seat in the North area, Cindy Bone Coates, Linda Mosley Lucas, and Vivian Shepard Pettigrew. Running for 1 seat in West Ashley, Eric Mack, Francis Baylock III. Was I close?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. It'll be the only name that looks like that on the ballot. Herbert Fielding and Paul Padron. Okay. Questions, again, have been selected from questions submitted by Charleston County School District teachers and prospective teachers from the College of Charleston. And these questions are directly from the people who will most be responsible for implementing the vision and ideas of the school board. Neither questions nor candidate responses represent the position of the Charleston Teachers Alliance or the College of Charleston. As for you guys, we ask that you refrain from distributing your signs, flyers, and other campaign materials while you're here. We, of course, do invite you to meet and talk to the audience after the program as you see fit. Okay. Again, we want each candidate to answer as many questions as possible, so please limit your answers to 1 minute. At the 1-minute mark, you'll be given a signal to wrap up from the front row. If the candidate does not wrap up within 20 seconds, I'll move on to the next candidate. So 2 of you will be talking at once, but we ask that you don't do that. In the interest of time, we'll ask the audience to please hold your applause until the forum is complete. Okay, here we go. Each candidate will begin with a 1-minute introduction, starting on the far left. Well, sorry.
Who's left?
You go first. Your seat 1.
Yes. So you go first.
Good evening, and thank you very much.
Use the mic in the center.
That's the educator in me. That's not used to a mic. But a good evening, and thank you very much for having us here. My name is Vivian Pettigrew, and I'm a candidate running for the North Charleston seat. I am a retired educator for 30 years. I've lived in North Charleston, born and reared. I went to the public schools in North Charleston. I'm looking forward to representing Charleston County School District with some innovation and change. I currently have a small business and I have a background in accounting and finances, so I can know that I can make a difference. Thank you again for having me.
evening, everybody. My name is Paul Padrone, and I have just retired from Charleston County School District this past July. I have served for 25 years as a teacher, principal, assistant principal, district administrator. I've had the pleasure to serve all the constituents, Mount Pleasant, James Island, Johns Island, West Ashley, and North Charleston. I've got 3 incredible kids that went through Charleston County schools. I've got 6 grandchildren, 1 who is a senior right here in West Ashley High School that we're very proud of. My goal is to serve our students, our community, more, and to make sure that we keep politics out of education. We've had a stranglehold on education with politics. My goal is to work collaboratively with the board and the administration to move Charleston education to where it should be. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Green, and I would like to thank the Charleston Teachers Alliance for hosting this event and for being interested in hearing about our perceived roles as board members. I have had a very successful career in public and private sector. I now own a consulting firm, a human resource consulting firm. My background is in human resources. I've been in have lived in Mount Pleasant for 17 years. I have been here doing the consulting work. I have been a lobbyist. I am a certified mediator, arbitrator. And I also have served on a lot of boards and commissions, which is one of the reasons that I'm running. I understand how boards and commissions should operate. But for me and my run for this board is all about the kids. And I'll talk about that as we move farther along in the evening. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Darby. I am a 30-year resident of the East Cooper area. I have 2 boys who graduated from our public schools, and while they were in school and after, I spent a lot of time doing education advocacy, going to board meetings and speaking to the board there. And when I'm not doing school board stuff, I work for Stir Funeral Home, but I feel like I'm doing more school stuff right now than ever. I want to thank you all for being here today. Thank you for the CTA and the College of Charleston for organizing. I sure appreciate the input that we receive from CTA when you all do surveys, and you have the hardest job in the world, and I know you're passionate about it, to be doing it every day, so thank you very much for being here.
Hi, I'm Eric Mack. Glad to be here tonight to be able to share some insight and some questions and to be able to address you tonight. I have a little bit about myself. I have 2 children that currently came through the Charleston County school system. I have a son who's in college, and I have a daughter who's currently a senior in high school right now as we speak. A little bit about myself. I've been a pastor now for about 15 years. I pastor a church in downtown Charleston. I've been at the Medical University for the past 21 years, where I serve as a data analyst. And I've served on numerous boards. Currently, of course, I'm currently serving on the Charleston County School Board. Our past and previous history, I've served 12 years on the local constituent school board. So I bring a vast knowledge of resources and background as to how schools operate and how they are governed. So I'm looking forward to continue this fight as we move forward and moving Charleston County to the next level. And I'm happy and excited tonight to be here to address your questions.
Kind of short. Hi. Okay, is this coming out of my time? Great, all right. So what does your finger mean? 10 seconds left?
Yes, no.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Francis Marion Baylot III. I grew up here. I went to public school at James Island, graduated from James Island High School in the year of Hugo. I went on to study psychology at the University of South Carolina and graduate school at Johns Hopkins, where I studied developmental psychology. I've worked for many years in child advocacy and statewide implementation of wraparound mental health services in schools and juvenile detention centers.
I have also worked in clinical trials for a lot of different issues in pediatric and adult mental health, as well as other healthcare issues. I bring a scientific background, but I also, I'm the only candidate up here, and I would be the only candidate on the board with professional and academic mental health experience, and I want to work very hard to bring that into each classroom. Thank you. I'm in each school.
Since I'm tall, I'll use this one too. Hi, my name is Cindy Von Coates, and I'm a resident of North Charleston. I'm running for one of the North Charleston seats. I want to thank y'all for being here. One of the things that is so exciting about this time is I've never felt such an engagement in the structure of public education in our community as we see at this time. You guys have always been the ones that changed the world. You guys have a chance to change how we educate children in South Carolina. This is an exciting time, and I'm looking forward to serving you with it. Unlike the rest of them, I don't have children. I have 2 stepchildren who are absolutely perfect, and I couldn't risk having the black sheep of the family. They both did graduate from Charleston County Schools. One is a homemaker on James Island, and one works for the U.S. State Department, is in Caracas, Venezuela. Even he has committed that he's retiring and moving home when his child turns 5 because he is committed to being in the Charleston County Schools. So do a great job. We've got grandchildren coming. Thank y'all very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Mosley Lucas, and I thank you for giving us this opportunity tonight. No, I'm not going to dance. I'm just going to tell you why I'm here. And I am here because you invited me, so I want to thank you again for that. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I've been, out of the school district as a retiree, so they say. On the books, I'm retired. In actuality, I'm still working with the children. I do a literacy program after school to make sure that they're not going to be the ones for whom prisons are built at 3rd grade failure levels. We want our kids to succeed. And this is an assignment for me to not just work with a small group of children, but to see to it that all of our children, the school district, Charleston County, for once is going to be on the top of the list of educational schools or educational ratings rather than 48 or 50. I hate that number. And you know, we're number 1 when it comes to having a good time or moving here or opening a business, but what about the children? So that's why I'm here. I guess I have 30 seconds to say I'm going to make a difference with your help. They're all our children. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Shad Johnson. I'm running for one of the 2 East Cooper seats on the Charleston County School Board. Thank you, Jody and Kevin, for arranging this, and thank you for, I see lots of familiar faces, teachers, parents, everyone coming out to listen. I think this might be the biggest crowd we've had at one of our candidate forums. But a little bit about me. I live in Mount Pleasant. It is my hometown. My husband and I have 2 children, and they've both gone through CCSD schools. My daughter is a senior at Wando, so we're working on college applications now. My background is in finance and law. I was a bankruptcy paralegal for the U.S. Department of Justice. I also have a lot of experience with policy. I've been on the district PTA board. I am on the board of the League of Women Voters. I'm currently taking a leave of absence so I can run this campaign. And I also lead a very large parent-teacher advocacy education group. We have almost 4,000 members. And we do get noisy on Facebook, if you know what I'm talking about, but we try to hear everyone's voice. We try to bring the parent and teacher voice to the table. Finally, I am the chair of the District 2 Constituent School Board in the Mount Pleasant area. So if we have any Wando faculty, Wando students, we do expulsion hearings for y'all, but we try to take care of our students. Anyway, I'm running for the school board because I want to bring some common sense and authentic leadership to the county board. Thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Jake Rambo. First and foremost, I am a parent. I have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a now 3-month-old who, very exciting news, actually rolled over for the first time today. So I'm told she's advanced, which will be my first, well, never mind. My wife would be mad if I said that. Secondly, I'm an educator. I spent 10 years in CCSD as a teacher and a principal. I taught in the elementary grades as a teacher and became an assistant principal and a principal. Now I work in, my family has a construction company, and so I do the personnel management, the HR, those sorts of roles with that company. And then third, I'm a leader. I stand up for what I believe in. I fight for what's right. Probably why Jody stuck me on the end without anybody next to me. But I'm excited about this forum, especially because the questions in this forum will finally get to how we actually educate our children, and maybe not so much of the upper level political questions, but what we're actually doing in the classroom. So, thank you.
Just checking to see if perhaps. No? Okay. All right, we're going to ask one question at a time. We will start with seat number 1. And again, we ask you to keep your answers to 1 minute. Question 1. Student discipline discussed often as an issue in schools. What is your position on CCSD's current student discipline policies? Restorative practice, progressive discipline plan, things like that. What do you think we can do to promote appropriate conduct from our students?
Every school in Charleston County is different. Every environment is different. Just as we have children that come from so many different backgrounds. Being in a classroom a teacher should never really have distractions from discipline problems. That's in the perfect world. Our discipline, we have a code of conduct, and we also have the progressive discipline plan, which is very extensive. I know that we need continuity across the district, and there has to be repercussions for actions. But the best area, once the district has set up some basic discipline policies, our principals and teachers really need to have the opportunity to set some guidelines for their schools. If your child or grandchild has attended a school that has no discipline problems, you may not understand that. But there are schools that do have discipline problems. So the principals and the teachers need to have the autonomy to be able to address situations that are in their schools. They know what is best and how to handle these discipline problems. I do believe that guidance counselors, and we do need mental health counselors in our schools to address many of the issues that are happening in our schools.
That's time. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next.
How can we put our most critical system in the hands of leaders that have not had proven results or expertise in the area of student discipline? We've done that in Charleston County. We need to ensure that we have leaders that work in the discipline that are experienced professionals in this area. We do not have a discipline plan. We have a punishment plan. We have systems that contradict each other back and forth. You have a discipline plan that says if you do this, you're going to get this, and you have a restorative justice project that goes contra. We've got to decide what it is that we need to do. What are the behaviors that we all can agree on? Because we don't have a well-defined plan that everybody agrees on what the behaviors should look like. We've got to do that first. We've got to come to consistency with that. And then we have to get everybody on board. You cannot train our teachers in our schools with 3 hours of PD the first week of school and expect them to take that on. We need to provide time for our teachers to really learn and really spend time with this plan and practice the discipline plan. Thank you.
Well, I agree that all schools are different, all kids are different, and the disciplinary actions for one child may or may not work for another child. But the crux of the issue, I think, is in terms of how we implement a disciplinary policy or any policy. It's hard enough to think that you have to have these policies in school, but I think that when the decision is made that you have to have a policy, you've got to get all of the players at the table. So teachers, parents, administrators, everybody should be involved in what is the disciplinary policy. So I go back to that point. I'm not sure how this one was laid out or how it was implemented, but I think the success in any plan such as a disciplinary policy would have to include discussions at the table on the front end, and then the other part of it is how it's implemented. You can't just roll these policies out and say, hey, teachers now go discipline the kids. If they had buy-in, they understand what was going on, so then it becomes a lot easier for them to take charge in trying to administer their discipline. Thank you.
So when I was elected to the school board in 2014, in one of our schools, 50% of the students were being suspended each year. And that was just not acceptable. Discipline was really inconsistent across the district. If a child broke the same rule at two different schools, the outcome would be different for them. And suspensions were disproportionate for African American and our special needs students. So we have had a lot of change in those 4 years. The Progressive Discipline Plan, the PDP, is an important tool that provides consistent response to behavior across the district, which we didn't have before. The PDP is not designed to change behavior, and I think things sometimes get confused about that. Things like PBIS are meant to change the climate and the culture at school. There are other programs that supplement that, the restorative practices, capturing kids' hearts, second step, you may be using different things at your school. Bottom line is we have to teach our kids the behavior we want. And we do have success across the district. Northwoods Middle is a great example, and I think we need to continue to work on that with our schools. Thank you.
So through the number of revisions that has transpired with this discipline plan, I believe that the Progressive Discipline Plan provides students with the opportunities to correct misbehaviors before leading to missed time out of classrooms due to in or out of school suspension. As we further look into it, the recent changes to the PDP, the Progressive Discipline Plan, including the regrouping of the misbehaviors with benefits and the process of putting in referrals and other documentations of students. I'm in full support of the restorative practice that has been put or implemented in some of our schools and has shown to be effective in suspension reduction and to the referral to the office. So through many different revisions, we have went through the PDP to make sure that we redefine it, that it becomes to be a working tool that will benefit and be productive inside of the schools. And as we get feedback on these plans, we are even doing more so revision because we want the tool to be one that will be effective in the school, that will not only help teachers but help students and help administrators so that we can have a culture of a stable learning. So I believe that the current PDP is working effectively. I didn't see him, so.
He's a preacher. You know he's going to talk a long time.
I can talk long too, so I've written down some basic points. And before I start, I need to apologize to Linda because I said I was the only person up here with mental health experience. I forgot you. I'm sorry about that. My mom walked in while I was talking, so I got really nervous. So I'm going to talk about it from three perspectives. First of all, my son, he loves his Mustang bucks, right? That works for him. My daughter, she could care less about that. So different kids need different things. And as a developmental psychologist, I just want to emphasize that my philosophy is learning doesn't happen with punishment and humiliation. So I'm glad to see that we've moved away from that. But I do think, from talking to teachers and principals around the district, that they do believe that CCSD has a good framework in place and should continue to encourage fidelity to evidence-based approaches that provide targeted, positive support for struggling students. And in addition, I think for the worst cases that we at the school board should be discussing is we should provide walk-in behavioral health counseling to students in every school. Thank you.
Do y'all want to take a moment and have Mr. Fielding introduce himself and get situated?
Perhaps after this question.
Okay, sure. So I think when it comes to the progressive discipline plan, that's one tool, but the object is this. After about 25 years, we have come to a point about 3 years ago where 82% of the children being suspended out of our schools were African American when they comprised about 40% of the students. We also had to face the hard reality that in the schools where students needed the most supports, they had the highest suspension rates. So the progressive discipline plan is a plan driven by, what I really like is that it was created by assistant principals. When you look at the list of the original creation, is teachers and assistant principals. It's a living document that changes throughout the various years, and the people who created, your peers, bring it to the board and let us review it every year now that we've started that. But the object is in the classroom, learning. You have to have both. They have to be in the classroom, but it also has to be an environment of learning. So you need a consistent framework, but absolutely execution. It depends on you. It depends on your children. There's no way an organization, a board, or anybody could sit here and say, here's what you do in this circumstance with a live human being. We're people. I work with addiction and recovery, and professionals in that field tell you they react different to different stimuli. So we need you to execute with fidelity a framework that says our goal started with not 82% of our children being sent out of the classroom.
Thank you. I think the PDP is a progressive step to improvement in the discipline policies of Charleston County. However, I wish that they had not only had the administrators, but also had even business partners, and would you believe even student representatives and parents to sit down and decide where we want to do this PDP. It doesn't seem to work at every school. Those that studies have shown that have children who are economically deprived are the ones who really need something a little bit different, like the restorative practices that they're doing. It took 4 years for CCSD to begin to implement that after it was being recommended by the Charleston Area Justice Ministry. It works around the world. What it does is it builds relationships between those who are thinking they're against each other. It allows them to do some conflict resolution, and there's peer mediation involved, so much so that it reminds me of what we did when we opened Clark Academy, CCSD's first dropout prevention program. We had a peer mediation program, we had a life skills program, and we didn't have fights. So I say, go ahead, let's do restorative practices for more schools in CCSD. They're all our children.
I told y'all at the beginning that I'm the chair of the constituent board over in Mount Pleasant area, so that means we do expulsion hearings. And just to give y'all an idea of how big of a problem discipline is in our school district, and I'm just going to give you some rough numbers. Over in District 2, Mount Pleasant area, we hear dozens of expulsion cases every year. That's criminal offense. In this area right here in St. Andrews, District 10, it's about 100. And in District 4, North Charleston, it's 200 per year. These are level 3 expulsions. So we have a big problem. So I know that progressive discipline plan was put in place to try to make sure that at one school, if the child did this and they did the same thing at this school, that they kind of get the same consequences. I kind of hope that through professional development with the principals, that would have been resolved. But so anyway, so we see these cases, and sometimes we'll look at a case now in the last year, and we'll say, why didn't this student come to us before? Through my education group, I also hear from teachers that say it's too rigid, we can't serve our students because we're, this offense, this happens, this, and it's like 5 offenses, and so they're actually having to sort of play with the numbers to get to actually serve their students. So the good news is the school district is tweaking that plan. It's too rigid. Also, parents have complained about fighting. If 2 kids are fighting, it's automatically you are going to get a consequence instead of who was the aggressor. There's a lot more thought that needs to be put into it. But thanks.
Can they repeat the question?
I will be short and to the point. It's a progressive discipline policy. I think it's excellent. All attempts should be made to keep a student in the education process. The one thing that I think I would add to the process is I believe a high-functioning or mature student should be involved in that decision-making as to whether a person is expelled or whatever the punishment would be, to get the opinion of a student instead of just the administrators, because sometimes I think administrators tend to look at the law like a codified situation, and they take the action that is codified. Whatever, some people will be excluded because their behavior is just that heinous. They need to be excluded. But even in that situation, they should be put into an educational situation that's separate from the regular schools. I think we have them, several of them around. Thank you.
When I listen to everybody's answers, I hear a lot of buzzwords, a lot of talk, but until you've been a teacher, it's really hard to understand exactly how much one student constantly misbehaving can impact a classroom full of kids. So yes, our goal is to have every kid be in their normal classroom every day. But unfortunately, that is not always the reality, and we have to face that. And there are 2 things when I talk about discipline. The first is support for the student. Many of our students who have discipline issues and are constantly causing disruptions, these are the kids that keep us up at night. These are the kids that we can't, stop thinking about how to help them. And unfortunately, we don't have the resources available in the schools currently so they can have proper counseling and proper mental health, as some have mentioned. But secondly, you do have to have rules and consequences. You can't have a child cuss out a teacher and they come back in the room 15 minutes later. What kind of message does that send to everybody, and what kind of learning environment are you creating?
Mr. Fielding, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay, my name is Herbert Fielding. I'm from Charleston. I live West Ashley. I am a retired Veterans Employment Specialist. I worked for 14 years at the South Carolina Commission for the Blind as Assistant Commissioner. So I did have a lot of exposure to the Department of Education because we were a Department of Education process. My latest job was, of course, Veterans Placement Specialist. I did, before I went to the Veterans Service, I worked for civilians in the one-stop. And I saw any number of young people that came in and could not pass work keys. They just were not prepared to pass work keys. And some of them had very immature ideas about starting businesses. So I do believe that, we were not preparing them properly for the work that is here in Charleston. Any number of young people could not get jobs at Boeing because they couldn't pass the test, or they didn't have the exposure to Microsoft products. So what I really would like to do is to go back to concentrating on education. I want to see kids learn how to read first. Very, very important that you read. And then mathematics. Thank you.
Number 2, the state faces a serious teacher shortage. Why do you think that is? And what are you prepared to do to solve the problem? Are your plans the same or different for new and experienced teachers, like professional development, support, salary? What are your options? Start with seat number 2.
You know, the teacher pay raise that we just got here in Charleston County was a good first step, but it can't stop there. South Carolina is the lowest, one of the lowest paid states. Okay, so yes, we may be paying more in Charleston than the surrounding counties. However, the cost of living in Charleston and the surrounding county is so much more that it almost negates the raise. If we are going to recruit and retain the top educators in the country, and we're going to need that here, we've got to do something better. We've got to make sure that not only are they paid great, but they're respected. When we ask for their input, we need to value their input. Not just listen and say, okay, we're not going to do anything you say. Our teachers feel like they have not been listened to. You know, I say all the time, the magic happens in the classroom. They are the key people that make the magic happen. All the supports need to go to that classroom, to that teacher that makes that magic happen. We need to focus on, let's limit the class sizes. We've got classrooms. I just stopped my old school, 35 kids in a classroom. 32 in a 6th grade classroom. How can we expect our teachers to do that? We can't do that. We wonder why our scores are going low. Well, that's why, because they can't handle all that on top of the paperwork, on top of the no planning time. We've got to value their time. And no, I would give different PD, just like we differentiate our students, we would differentiate the PD for our teachers based on what they need and what they tell us we need.
I don't have an educated answer on what has really caused the teacher shortage, but I would venture to say that part of it is the teaching profession, it doesn't pay well, and unless you're really dedicated to the idea of teaching, then it can be difficult for people to go into that profession and not get the support, not get the respect they think they deserve. I totally believe in teachers being rewarded for their performance. I support what the Charleston County School District did this year, and I would agree that we can't stop there. We will have to continue to look for ways, and it may be, I mean, in terms of looking at the General Assembly, they are not supporting teachers like they should, and so as a county, as a district, I think we are going to have to take that leadership role and decide what it is we can do to help incentivize the teachers.
I think you all can probably all explain why there is a shortage. One reason is that the state has teachers are retirement eligible after 28 years. So you're pretty young when you're retiring, and the 10,000 K earnings cap obviously makes a difference there. Plus, not as many kids are coming out of college into the teaching profession. So I'd like to see us do a lot. I do think we need to differentiate between what we're doing for first-year, second-year teachers and our more experienced teachers. But I do want to talk about teacher compensation. This year, the board agreed during the budget time to spend $12.5 million to give teachers an increase. And over the 4 years that I've been on the board, we've given teachers an increase every year. Not necessarily classified staff or administrators, but teachers. And I will wholeheartedly agree that you should make more. If we end up being the highest paid in the state and it's $40,000, it should be more than that. It should be $50,000. I agree and would love to see that happen. It's a challenge if you've ever been to a board meeting to get us to pass a budget. I've voted for the budget for the last 4 years and will continue to advocate for compensating teachers at the highest level possible. Thank you.
I believe that one of the primary and main issues related to teacher shortage is the pressure of the state testing and evaluation that are keeping our aspiring teachers from entering into the profession. The lack, of course, of the adequate pay is also a deterrent in teachers entering into this profession. So, but current teachers, educators are finding it, I've learned for it to be increasingly difficult to keep up with the demands that are in place while effectively educating children. I fully support professional development. I fully support the teacher pay scale that was just recently passed by the board, so that we are not below market value, but above market value that are currently there. And I would continue to push for the discussions and ways for identifying how we can increase teacher pay, identifying ways on how we can have more professional development for our teachers, which is critical and which is important. So I believe those are just some of the areas of why we may have what we consider to be teacher shortage in the state. Thank you.
I don't know about the state because I'm running for the CCSD board, and I think this is a really deeply existential question about where we've gotten to over a generation of public policy, and we're suffering. The chickens have come home to roost. Teaching in public schools have been attacked and pounded with failed policies for a generation. Starve, deprive, test. Starve, deprive, test. Repeat ad nauseum. And then call it a failure and auction it off to the privateers. That's what's going on right now, and I'm ready to call it out at the State House, here, or anywhere. And I will die on this hill for that. Now, that mentality comes from both parties, where they seek to undermine the public education as an institution, and that's a fact, and you can look into it. The second part of the question asked about experienced teachers versus new teachers, and I wanted to say that it would be helpful for experienced teachers to serve as mentors and leaders, and new teachers to have more immediate Title I experience in the pre-service sector, so they don't get put into these Title I schools with no experience and then run off back to somewhere else. So that's it for a minute.
So about 6 years ago, I attended a forum in Georgia, and there's a gentleman out of Iowa, and he's written a list. 100 years ago, schools did not offer lunch. You had to bring your own. It was in the 1940s before Philadelphia became the first school district that mandated that schools would serve lunch. Since that time, there have been over 70 other responsibilities, either federal or state, placed on schools through federal regulations and state regulations. We have continued to add to a system when the system needs to be brought up to date. Teachers are working in a system that is very difficult to work in, and quite often they're accused of being the face of the dysfunctional system. We've got to attack this at that level, that we have to understand students are different, children are changing, and this world is changing. You guys have to lead how we educate children in the future, and it has to be a structural change. There's just no other way to get people who want to go into this industry that tends to say you have to be in this industry till you retire. As far as compensation and support services, absolutely, there's no question. And one thing that we have done is we have now, as of last night, bound future boards to your pay raises for the next 2 years. They would have to actively undo them. The money is set aside in future budgets because that needs to happen.
None of us can say that it's only because of the salary, although we can all say that the salary is really ridiculous, considering the cost of living in this glorious place that everybody's moving to. But besides that, it tells us that the teachers that we have are getting into teaching and education because they have a heart for it. If you're still in South Carolina and thinking about going into education, you must have a heart for the children in the first place. I am one who came back here and took a 50% pay cut. So it was something about the children, because in New York, I couldn't even talk with my friends about my salary. It got to be a little bit embarrassing. But there's some other things we can do. Yes, we can give our teachers incentives such as housing assistance, health and wellness. They are in a very stressful, it's a very stressful position to be in. Having a team teacher. And what about a mentor, someone who's experienced and scheduled in your time that day? Seems like my time goes by faster than anybody's. Schedule in your time to meet with that person, not to yell in the parking lot, how do I handle this? No, it takes a lot. And I also want to end by saying the administrators need to be trained to know how to talk with the teachers, how to know what the needs are, how to talk with them about new assignments instead of saying, this is where you go. Teachers count. Thank you for not saying it.
So I have the education group, and I can tell you my inbox is just full all the time from teachers that contact me. And I've had the education group for 7 years, parents and teachers working together. And I feel like parents have had to speak for teachers because teachers are afraid to speak out. And so yes, the pay, everyone wants the pay to go up. And as board members, we can advocate at the state level. They don't even give us the money that's mandated. That's a start. The pay increase here, that's great. But we have to stop blaming teachers for student test scores. We've got to give our teachers a voice so they're not afraid to speak out and ask for what they need in their classroom. They shouldn't be spending all their money on classroom supplies. I mean, there are all kind of things that can be done. Yes, we have to take the test, SC Ready. We do have to take it. We don't have to put MAP scores up on the bulletin board. We don't have to talk about making personnel decisions based on student test scores. And so as a board member, that is my priority. I understand what high-stakes testing means. It doesn't just mean testing. It means using test scores to make decisions about teachers, and that's what we need to address.
I mean, if you look at it, when I came along, a teacher was someone in high esteem. We have reduced that to more than just a contract worker. I did the figures on South Carolina in comparison to the United States. On the low end, we're $4,000 under. A teacher coming in, we just receives $39,000 in the United States. In Charleston, we're $35,000 in South Carolina. The middle is the one that's most important. The two comparisons, $52,000 to $59,000, is $7,000 higher on the national average. Okay, so we can't get any more money. So why don't I get a 10% discount at Lowe's because I'm a veteran? Why can't a teacher get that? Why can't a teacher get, as she said, a little 1 point off of a mortgage? It would be an excellent way of bringing them back. We really have to realize Charleston is much more expensive than any place else in the state of South Carolina because it's a tourist place. And money is what has really pushed people away from the teaching tradition. I think we do need to work very hard on the legislature to get those persons. A teacher has a master's degree. A lawyer is basically the same thing, a master's degree. But a lawyer can make $150 an hour. A teacher's not making $150 an hour. I don't know of any teacher that makes that kind of money. So in reality, we need to argue for the fact that teachers need to be paid better so that we attract that kind of person to the field.
Yeah, this is a complex issue. There's a lot of reasons for the teacher shortage. I think you can boil them all down to 3 main reasons: pay, discipline, and respect. First and foremost, pay is a big reason. I can't stand when we as educators say, it's not about the pay. Pay has a lot to do with it, so let's not cheapen that. And on the pay, I would say, to be cognizant of board members who in the past have not made teacher pay a priority, but do so in an election year. The second thing is discipline, which we already kind of talked about, so I won't hit on that again. And then the third thing is just a lack of respect. I mean, we need to get input from our teachers. We need to value that input. We need to treat them as professionals. We need to give them the autonomy they need in the classroom to do what they need to do to serve their students. And having since been in the private world, it was eye-opening because I ran out of Post-it notes on like my third day, and guess what? The company just bought more. I didn't have to go out to the store and buy more. When I use the copier, it doesn't shut off after a certain number of copies. It's amazing. But those are the kind of things that drive us crazy that are small little fixes. So,
Thank you. Yes.
You've heard so many things that I'm not going to try to repeat them. But I think that one of the key things is that our teachers needed to be afforded the same respect as any other profession. Teachers provide a great service. Everyone here today, a teacher has had an effect on your life. How much do we value that? Yes, they need more pay. It's a very stressful job. Yes, discipline is an issue. Excessive testing is an issue. They have limited resources. We need to provide them with the professional development that they need, especially our new teachers. We aren't giving them the resources that they need to do the job that they have graduated from college to do. We need to put, when a doctor goes into an area, he gets to be an intern. What are we doing? We need to look at a lot of areas where we can help our teachers.
Okay, question 3, we will start with seat 3 for an answer. Do you agree with the district policy that teachers with over 25 years experience should no longer receive any step pay increases? And how do you address the discrepancy between the pay and salary increases of administrators in comparison to teachers?
Well, as a senior, I would really be opposed to any increases being eliminated because you've been there for X number of years. I think that the pay for a teacher is as important as at year 1 as year 25. I was in state government when the step increases were implemented. I'm not sure of the reasons behind the policy as it exists now, but I really believe that if a teacher is willing to dedicate themselves to staying in the classroom for 25 years, 28 years, they should certainly not be penalized for the time that they stay in the classroom.
So the question was, do you agree with the district policy of 25? No, I don't. I think that, personally right now, I think the step should go to 30. The state mandates them to only go to 23. I'd certainly be open to hearing from teachers as to what you think, because a lot of teachers would want to stay past that 30. We have a teacher shortage. We know that, and we are working really hard to recruit and maintain the teachers that we have here in CCSD. So we've already started some discussions for the budget for next year, including increasing that step. And last night we approved phase 3 of the plan to increase teacher pay. And so, I've got a copy here of what the salary schedule will be for the next school year. So teachers will have that. For the pay discrepancy, in 2014, the district approved a study done by Fox Lawson, and it really increased assistant principal and principal's pay because we were way off target with market. We were really behind. So those assistant principals and principals pay increase. We do have administrators. They work a 12-month schedule. Most teachers, I know, you're paid for a 9-month schedule. I know there are times that you work more than that. So I think that's something we can always look at. We want to keep the best qualified people here in the district. Thanks.
So I too must add that since I've been on the board, teachers, that we have been advocating for pay increase, and not just because it's an election year that the topic has come up, nor has the approval been made, but the application has been going forth since the onset, since I've been on the board. But I strongly believe that with the added read to succeed courses that all educators must attain in South Carolina and all the other continuous mandate professional developments, that all educators should be eligible for a step pay increase regardless of the years of experience. Do I agree with the current policy? No. Will I push for the policy to include where step increases are mandated or will be given regardless of the number of years? Absolutely. We have been, or I have been, fighting since on the board and have included in budget proposals, and as we move forward, that teachers are paid at a rate that's not below market value, and we've done that just this past recently in the budget this year, and it just so happened to be an election year, but it happened, and the year before that we did it. So it's not that teachers are neglected or looked at any different way. We value you, and we value what you're being paid, and we're trying everything to our best, I believe, and since I've been on the board, in making sure that those pay increases happen to our teachers.
I don't like to read, but I got to get through this in a minute, and this is just not enough time. My mom's here, and I'm allowed to say that she has 30 or more years of experience teaching. So my answer to that question, I have 3 parts to it. It's no, are you kidding, and what part of no did you not understand? But one, I want to propose a policy idea for this imbalance. And so I'm going to propose that all CCSD salaries should be yoked so that any increase at 75 Calhoun Street has to be matched in a school-based salary. If you want a 6-figure position at 75 Calhoun Street for your buddies, fine. Create an equal school-based position inside a school, all right? CCSD spends 50% of its budget on education and instruction. Do you think that's enough? I do not. The highest rate in South Carolina is 60%. We should be at 75%, and I will fight to get there before the end of 2 terms. And that's why I say 75 at 75 by 25.
So this is the first thing that really frustrated me from the moment I got on the board. And it's not just this industry. So the short answer is, yes, you are incentivizing teachers to leave the classroom if you tell them you are only going to get a cost of living increase by staying in the classroom. We have principals, we have teachers, the entire time I've been on the board, applying for other jobs within the district. They want a bigger high school. Teachers want to be principals. Principals apply for jobs in the administration. And the question is, if you value that, then why do you cap the income people can earn inside a classroom? It's an upside-down business model that says we want you to stay inside the classroom. We need teachers in the classroom. We need tenured teachers. We need experience. Well, that isn't what you're saying if your ability to earn higher incomes exists in your industry outside of the classroom. It's always frustrated me. Principals in our smallest schools need to be treated in every aspect to feel like that's the most important place they should ever be. Teachers should be treated like being in the classroom is the most important place they should ever be. And that is absolutely a 180-degree difference from having a state law that says that after 23 years, you don't get compensated.
I've read that in some states they have a 7-step plan, in other states they have a 30-step plan. You know, we have to look at it mathematically. What is within each step? Hopefully it means you're getting more money, but where are you starting from? I believe that if you start at a much higher salary, the steps will just keep you from being disappointed when you get to maybe 30 steps. But if you're going to start at an awful salary and then you're going to be stopped at 25, and each of those steps only gives you a little bit of money, you really need to keep going because you don't have enough money. So I think we need to look at it in terms of where do we begin? Begin decently, begin higher, and let the increments continue, because it's like snatching something back after you've promised somebody a good career. Then you say, oh, you're finished, you can leave now. But you know they're not going to leave. So we should continue with that. As far as administrators are concerned, I remember that there were times when they did not get any increments, they did not get any raises, and others of us did. So I don't deny them the opportunity to get a raise from time to time. I guess they need it.
I do not agree with the policy either, that all teachers should get a step increase. I do believe that our school district is top-heavy and there's too much money. There are wonderful people that work at 75 Calhoun, and I work with them in my position on the constituent board. But I do think there's too much money and focus down at 75 Calhoun, and it doesn't reach the classroom. So that's sort of like a big picture idea. I would like to shift that focus. I also want to throw out, just related to pay, so I don't sound like we're all saying the same thing. Pay for performance is something that is being talked about now in our school district, and it was in the Clemson Diversity Study recommendation. I just want to remind everyone that we've done this before. I was on the steering committee for Bridge, which was the Teacher Incentive Fund federal grant that was multi-million dollars, that was a grant that was not approved by the board. And Kevin, are you in here? Because you worked on it. We tried to make the very best we could out of that. It was basically paying teachers a bonus for student test scores, and also having outside evaluators come in to evaluate our teachers. It turned out the outside evaluators did the same as the principals. You know, there was no difference. And then basically we sent the 5-year grant back a year early. So we've done that before. I don't want to hear merit pay again.
When I read this question, I didn't understand it. At that point, I don't really understand why, if you are evaluating a person on a yearly basis and they're performing, why you would stop anything. It doesn't really make sense to me to tell somebody who's doing a good job, no, I'm not going to give you a raise because you made 25 years. I mean, that doesn't really make sense. There's one thing that we've stepped across is the fact that I looked at the salaries at 75 Calhoun Street. There are a lot of people that are getting paid a lot of money that are not teaching. They're not even teaching teachers. They have very, very big degrees in teaching, but they're not teaching teachers how to teach. So it's really time to get some folks up off of that and get them out there to where the rubber meets the road. Paper is really good to push around, but this is education. It should be meeting students and teaching.
I would say that we just don't value our veteran teachers enough. I remember my first year teaching 4th grade. I probably wouldn't have made it through that year if I didn't have a teacher down the hall from me. I've cried on my wife's shoulder, my mom's shoulder, and her shoulder. And so, but we're not valuing that experience. We say all the time we want to run, or not we, but a lot of people running for office or hold public office say we need to run schools like businesses. Well, what business do you know that you gain all this experience and knowledge and you're the expert and they tell you, oh, never mind, we're not going to give you a bonus this year, we're not going to give you any more increases. That's asinine. It doesn't make any sense. So why are we doing that with our teachers?
In my 30 years, I am a product of a cap. I felt like, why did I waste all this time when they don't want to stop paying me, but I'm still doing my job? Absolutely no. There should not be a cap on teachers' salaries. The more years that they have, the more experience that they have, they need to be paid for that.
Once again, we forget that the magic happens in the classroom with a great teacher. We forget that. It's been 4 years, and for some it's been 8 years, and we're still capping at 25. why all of a sudden is it so important this year? This is a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer. This should have been the same way we did our retired people a few years back. A couple of years back when we penalized them 15% if they were a retired teacher, penalized their salary, came back to teach. But you know what? We didn't do that to administrators. Administrators came back with a full salary, even if they were retired. So we wonder why we have a hard time recruiting teachers? There you go. We've got to change this, folks. We've got to focus on where the magic happens, in the classroom.
Question 4. Class size is often mentioned by teachers as a way to improve teaching and learning. How important do you think it is to reduce class size? And what do you base your position on? Starting with C4.
So we hear a lot about reducing class size, and a lot of research has shown that reducing class size is not as important as other factors in learning environments. We've heard a lot about 2 teachers in the classroom and things like that. We do know that an overcrowded classroom is more difficult to differentiate and to do individualized instruction, and I'm sure a lot of other things. So I think reducing class size is something we should continue to talk about. As we heard last night when the CEO of Advanced Ed made his presentation about the accreditation, and actually in the Clemson Diversity Study too, both of those groups really pushed the point that children learn differently, and we need to be, as a board, as the district, allocating funds in that way. We shouldn't just have a formula that says all elementary schools get X number of teachers. And so I think you'll see the board working much harder and more closely this year to make sure we're individualizing the compensation or the money that goes to each school for class size, to make sure that each child can learn in the way they need to learn and be funded in that way. Thanks.
So there's no doubt that classroom size are plaguing the school classroom all over our school district. And with the teacher shortage, there becomes to be a potential development that teachers are faced with in increased class sizes. Should that be the fault of the teacher or the fault of the student? Absolutely not. But I believe that as a district, as we are promoting with a slogan that as students are truly the heart of our work, it should show in all the aspects that directly affect our students. And I believe the student to teacher ratio should be telling of our goals in CCSD. With trying to differentiate to meet the needs of all students, large classroom size, in my personal opinion, will prove to be a deterrent. So to conclude, we must, and I will, look at ways continually to try to find too low classroom size within our schools. Not only because it's an election year, it's because we need to look at ways of trying to identify small classroom size with our teachers so that we can have more one-on-one with our students. Those things will help to decrease our discipline problem, but also will increase our academic rigor that will take place within the classroom.
So I've been going around canvassing for James Smith and Joe Cunningham, and I probably knocked on 2,000-3,000 doors, and about every 20th door is a teacher, and I asked, what are the 3 main things that bother you? And the first one is class size, the second one is pay, and the other is high-stakes standardized tests. So I've said in my campaign material, to keep it simple, that I think a 20-to-1 ratio should be a cap with an assistant. However, it's more complicated than that because it depends on the age and it depends on the curricular content about what that ratio should be. I've talked to teachers who have 29 students in a Montessori school. I mean, it's ridiculous. I've talked to teachers who have kids who sit on the floor, not for crisscross applesauce story time, but they actually sit on the floor. So this is really absurd, and I think it reflects the values that we do not have in support of public education perfectly.
This is how I'll bring my notes, so I might not go over my time. But I do believe that class size needs to be reduced, and I base that on the fact that that is what teachers tell us. I base that on the fact that when we have 2 teachers in a classroom, people do well partnering with each other. To have 2 teachers in the classroom and tag off of each other would be amazing. And I would encourage you as teachers, we need your help, because in the state of South Carolina, unless it's English or math, once you reach the 4th grade, the state regs are 35 students to 1 teacher. And while that's only a state reg, that then turns into how much the state will fund schools for teachers. Now, CCSD has been publishing their student-to-teacher ratio in the back of the budget for the last 3 years, and I think you should look at that and give feedback. Is this happening in your school, and does it work? Because we are doing about 5 to 7 below the state standard in all of our classes, but you deserve to see what that is. And we need to know if you think the class sizes that we believe is reduced because we are cutting it from what the state funds, is that small enough? But I really think supportive services is just as important for teachers as small class sizes and teaching in partnerships.
Class size, relationships. The smaller the class, it seems, or at least we have found out, that the children seem to do better. They've even done studies about that. And they have concluded that when the classes are smaller in the elementary level, where kids are just beginning to learn, that really sets them up for success. Also, where you have a school where many of the children are not doing well in reading and math, class size counts. So we need to think about that. I know the legislators look at it in terms of how much can we get for the money. They don't say it that way, I know. But that's what they're thinking. What is the best product for this money? These are our children. And I think if we put the money that they need, special ed kids need class sizes, anyone with any special needs, diversity issues, even language issues, they need class sizes that are smaller. So I believe that we need to put the money and all the resources and all the support at the beginning and help them become that successful, productive citizen, so then they will give the money back. Class size.
Yes, class size matters, and it's critical. And we need to reduce class size, but you can't just reduce class size and teach the same way to all the students. You have to have individualized instruction. So how do I know this? I'm running for this office because I am in touch with what is going on in our schools. Teachers have told me class size matters. My children have been in our schools. My daughter's still there. So at Wando, her geometry class with 32 students, that's a different experience from one of her AP classes with maybe 18 students. It's discipline. I mean, there's so many things. Smaller class size matters, and that needs to be a big focus for the school board.
The question asked, what do you base it on? Everybody's told you already, class size is critical. Charleston County, at this point in time, 67% of third graders read below their grade. And if you're not reading, you're not learning. The bottom line is maybe the new teachers that are coming in need to be the assistants to those experienced teachers so that they learn how to teach. Because, when I went in the Navy to learn to be a mechanic, they didn't just give me a jet engine and I go at it because I came there and I was going to be a mechanic. Somebody taught me how to be a mechanic. So I don't see anything wrong with keeping some of those teachers that we're putting out because they made 25 at the top and putting some of those young teachers in with some elder teachers to learn. And the product is to be able to teach. It doesn't have to happen in every class, but I think it should happen in reading and math. Those are two very important areas. You need to double up on the kids to reduce the student-to-teacher ratio.
One skill I developed as a teacher and principal is to tell when I was losing the room and this is a large class size. So I'll just put it this way. Should class size be reduced? Yes.
I'm not as cute as he is. But class size is relevant. If you've got 35 kids, all on different reading levels, one teacher to be as effective as they need to be, that's a no-brainer. We need to reduce our class sizes. We keep forgetting the one thing. We are here for the education of children.
You know, I mentioned class size a few minutes ago. I hear a lot, all the talk about class size, but talk doesn't mean anything. It's actions that mean something. We keep hearing the same thing of the past few years. And the past 2 years we've had our class sizes continue to increase. It's not what you say, it's what you do that matters.
One size doesn't fit all. And ultimately, I really think that is a question that you should answer, not board members. If I was elected to the board, I would be looking to teachers, principals, and administrators to tell the board what they need for class size.
Teachers are a critical factor in a student's achievement, and district has many ways of holding teachers accountable. But with retention and summer school no longer used or rarely used, some teachers contend that students should have increased responsibility for their success. Where do you stand on that topic, and what would it look like?
I've always had a solid belief that parental involvement is critical in a child's education and within their success. Teachers, you are faced with a multitude of different type of students that you teach on a daily basis. I've always advocated from the very beginning that a parent that's involved in a child's education from the beginning and the onset and throughout the school year, you will potentially have a successful student by the end of the year because the parents are involved. I believe that is critical, and I will continue to push the effort of trying to find ways, of better identifying ways at the school level on how we get our parents more involved into our child's education. If we have successful parental involvement teaching them, because there are a number of kids that come from different backgrounds, different resources, and their success is not high because of the atmosphere from which they come from and what they're dealing with on a daily basis. You have to take on that onset when they come to school every day. So we have to find ways of how we get these parents more educated, more involved, so that they can have a better understanding of what their child is learning every day, so that reinforcement can take place back at home. And I believe that if we push for that strong parent advocacy within our schools, that we will see. Thank you.
I'll be real short on this one, because simply put, I resent the framing of teacher accountability that I hear all the time. Where else do we hear that? What other professions do you hear that all the time? I think it's just not right, and I think it's coming from a place that does not support public education and tries to reframe it and tie teacher performance to things like value-added assessments and these complex algorithms that don't give us the information that we really need. If you want to know about a teacher, ask the parents whose kids were in that class at the end of the year.
So this is a great question, because if you, and we should on this board, stage, believe that teaching is a highly consequential profession, then this is the depth of your expertise. You need to tell us, what does a student accountability for their learning look like? I made straight A's until I was in the 8th grade, and I made a C in biology because my biology teacher got pregnant and left, and we hated the substitute teacher. 3 of us did not make an A that semester. 2 of those kids had repercussions. My family wasn't quite that way. I am the only one that graduated from high school. My mother didn't even notice. So I know what it looks like when on the outside of the classroom, what some people just don't think are critical factors. But I absolutely believe we've got to have a balance that says the students have to be accountable. I was pleased to see the state talking about ways to hold the students accountable with the 3rd grade reading, and then they did what they always do when they make a law. They put 13 exemptions in it to make sure that there would be nobody held accountable to the law. We've got to have students engaged and responsible for their learning.
Okay, the question is whether the students need to be more responsible. To be responsible, you have to be taught what that means, what it looks like, and how you get to be responsible. So there's still adults involved in this. If you look at it the way Maslow does, you all know that, with the basics, the food, the physiological needs, the warmth, the safety, and then you go to the psychological, the self-esteem, and the rest, and then you get to where you want the kids to go, to be self-actualized, or at least producing. But they still have to start at the bottom. When we give them the methods of learning that they have accomplished something, internally, they begin to learn that I can do more than this. I can do the next step. I can go further. Success depends on how we treat them from the very beginning, and they are not going to learn responsibility by osmosis. We do have to teach it to them, let them learn it, live it, be excited about it, and go forward as successful adults.
I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit, because part of this I said once, and I was misunderstood and misquoted, so I want to make sure I get this right. Teachers are the most important in-school factor for student achievement, but so of course we've got to support our teachers, make sure the focus gets to the classroom, kind of a lot of things we've talked about so far, but this is the part I need to read. A student's home life and socioeconomic status is the most critical factor in determining student achievement. Now, I didn't just say poor students can't learn, because that's what someone misquoted me as saying. What I'm saying is we need to understand that. We need to stop blaming teachers. We need to stop blaming public education. We, and I mean everyone in this room, social reform is needed. We need to make sure, we have better housing, better jobs. That's kind of a key. We can't, teachers cannot do it all by themselves. So what can we do, meanwhile, we're all working on social reform and getting everyone where they need to be in the community? Smaller class size, which we keep talking about, effective discipline plans, community partners, invite families in. There's some of the same parents, it becomes a cycle sometimes. A parent doesn't have a good experience in school, and then their children, and then they don't want to, the parents don't want to come back in, and they don't feel comfortable volunteering, so we need to work with them on that and parent advocates.
I think I remember when I was a student, somebody would ask you, what are you going to be? I was going to be a fireman. I really didn't know what a fireman did. I just thought it was a really cool place on Cumming Street where all the guys. And that's what happens to students. Nobody takes them out to Boeing and shows them, what an executive does and what requires you to get there. We really need to involve. You say you want the student more responsible for what they're going to be. Well, then they need to have a realistic picture of what they're going to be or want to be. And I think then they will solve their own problems about getting to those jobs or those situations that they want. A lot of what we do in the schools is inside the school, and it's that same question. What are you going to be? I'm going to be a doctor. Well, did you know you got to go to school for 12, 14 years before you can be a doctor? You got to learn serious math and chemistry and some other stuff. A lot of those things are there. But I think if you involve some of the executives from business and bring them into the schools to teach, because an engineer can teach a student what it's like to be a real engineer. A lawyer can tell you what it's like to be a real lawyer. Not a teacher can't do that.
So, some of you have probably seen this, but it's kind of like a popular meme on the internet. But basically, it's a picture of a student holding a report card, and it's got a bunch of F's on it. And it says 30 years ago, and it has the picture of the parents yelling at the kid. And then it has a picture of today, and it has a picture of the parents yelling at the teacher while the kid stands there with like a little smirk on his face. So it is imperative to understand that students do have to be a willing participant in their child's education. I come from an elementary background, so in early childhood, we're doing a lot of pumping kids up and getting them engaged and stuff like that. As you move on in school and you get to middle and high school, it becomes even more so that that student has to be committed to that work. And, success doesn't happen overnight. I mean, if you can go out and, practice your sports skills every day for 30 minutes, like I tell my son, if you practice your reading as much as you practice your dribbling, you would be doing a little bit better. So anyway, yes, the students have to be a willing participant in education.
Maturity is a part of accountability and responsibility. I look at a lot of the guys in here, men in here tonight, and you were not the same person in high school that you are tonight. Yes, we need to teach children from very small responsibility, accountability. We need to give positive reinforcement as they are learning those skills. When they get to middle school and high school, we continue to teach that. In high school, they will need to take more responsibility for their education. I see children develop at different levels, so we need to continue to work with them, ensure that they know the importance of their education, especially when they make a decision about what they want to do. Well, how do we get to that point? Those things need to be discussed. I think that our guidance counselors and our parent advocates can help parents and children navigate through those waters.
First of all, part of the accountability doesn't start with the teacher and end with the teacher. It starts with the teacher and goes all the way up the chain to the board of trustees. Everybody has to be accountable for the education of the children of this county. With that being said, we got to make sure that our teachers' voices are heard when it comes. They know what the kids need and what they need to have. This past year, we recommended 8 students for retention. I'm not a big proponent of retention, but we recommended 8 students because they were reading below a 3rd grade level. And we know that in middle school, if we don't make something happen soon enough, the chance of them dropping out in high school increase. But we had no option to give them because we don't have the resources to give them summer school. We haven't even thought out of the box. Year-long school for some schools that have problems like this. We have not thought out of the box at all. We've given, here's your problem, we retain, but all those students were socially promoted, all of them. There's a problem because we continue to send failure up, and they're going to fail again in high school where it really matters. So we really have to think out of the box on this. We have schools that have extreme challenges with kids, more than 50 or 60% of their kids not reading on grade level, reading at a 3rd and 4th grade level. We can't have that. We can't have that. We've got to focus on the problem here.
Well, I think that all stakeholders should be involved in educating our children, and I think that the accountability factor is with the student, the teacher, the parent. So I think that the entire community needs to come together when we talk about student achievement. I also believe that we should have high expectations for our students. I think we should expect of them and ingrain in them what our expectations are. But of course, by also doing that, by giving them the tools that they need so that they can be successful.
I think from when I went went to school, when many of you went to school, times the culture has really changed with student responsibility. A couple of years ago, we discovered that at one of our high schools, that the children never got a failing grade. Even if they failed, they never got a failing grade because the administration there felt like they shouldn't be disappointed. Well, that's not how things are in the real world. So we are trying several strategies, including co-teaching and a summer teacher residency to increase student achievement. And certainly students should own their responsibility for their learning, but we have to work to make sure all students know what it means to take responsibility. That's part of what you all do every day. We can't assume that all of our students have the supports at home that many of us had and are fortunate to have. So I think we have to continue to work with all of our students to teach them lifelong learning skills and help them understand what responsibility is and what it means in a school context. And I agree with what Joy said. We've got to have really high expectations for our students so they can rise to those expectations. Thank you.
Teachers have to plan lessons, grade assignments, and then they're also teaching. So I'm asking, what is your position on a requirement that teachers have at least 20 minutes unencumbered time during the day to eat lunch or plan individually, that type of thing? Start with seat 6.
This is an easy one. Yes, in 20 minutes. I also think it's weird that at the district, 50,000 students in 80 schools, that we're talking about when teachers eat lunch. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. I don't see that as our role, and I think we need to think bigger and longer from a visionary point of view, 50 years about what we're going to do. So yes, of course. But just for the fun of it, I would also advocate for a full day of planning, Fridays, at least 2 times a month.
So then we're going to save some time on this because, yes, it's a no-brainer.
30-second time. Okay.
Can I get some of that time later?
No. I don't know if it was here or New York that they were requiring folks to take 15-minute breaks in the day because they knew that we needed to stop what we were doing just to be alive and well. But I will say 20 minutes is not enough time. In high school, I remember at Wando, they had a whole period. They called it a planning period, and the teacher did their planning and or whatever else he or she needed to do, including meeting with another teacher. So I would say at least 30 minutes, if not a whole hour, or period, because it might be a 50-minute period. Yes.
Yes, the answer is yes, more than 20 minutes. The bottom line is we need to take care of our teachers. And when I ran for this position 4 years ago, I actually heard people didn't vote for me because I was a candidate that was for the teachers. And I thought, don't you understand, if you're supporting your teachers, we are supporting our students. And I think hopefully the awareness, it's changed a little bit in 4 years, that people get this, that we have to treat our teachers right. If teachers don't have time to grade test and do the lessons plans, I know what happens. And this is not saying anything bad against teachers, but suddenly the test is a quick multiple choice Scantron, which doesn't always help, for the student, tell me what you know with the long answer. They need time to have tests that give the students a chance to say all they know, gives them time to grade it too.
I guess it is an easy question. I think when you work, the federal requirement is 15 in the morning, 15 in the afternoon, and a half an hour for lunch or something to that point. It's something like that, isn't it? Yes. Teachers don't have that?
No.
Why not? How do you eat? I mean,
With your kids.
okay, no, that makes sense. It should be more than 20 minutes.
So transitioning into private business is interesting, and I miss the school and the kids greatly. But when people ask me what the good thing is, I tell them that I don't have to eat in the lunchroom, which is the loudest place on earth. I can leave for lunch and get myself a treat if I want to, and I can even go to the bathroom when I actually have to go to the bathroom. It's amazing. So my body's no longer trained to only go to the bathroom at 11:15 and 2:30. But no, I mean, teachers, I don't think people understand just how much outside of the actual teaching day that teachers have to do. You have your plans, you have your grades, you have your communications, you have your grade level meetings, your TCT meetings, you've got faculty meetings that last too long, and you've got to write receipts for the field trip, and I mean, the list goes on and on of stuff you have to do, and there's not enough time during the day. So, yes.
I believe the majority of the people here are educators, but for those of you who are not, I want you to go one day and volunteer at an elementary or middle school and watch the teachers bring the children down to lunch. They wolf down their lunch, prodding the kids along. You've got 10 minutes, you've got 5 minutes. Stop talking, eat your lunch, we've got to go. 20 minutes is not enough time. Yes, yes, yes.
So once again, everybody says the right thing here. Everybody says, yes, we have to do this. And the reason why it's important to have an educator on the board is because these people are good people. The board of trustees are good people. However, they don't understand that every decision they make has a trickle-down effect to the classroom. So when they cut allocations, when they cut resources, these are the problems that come from those situations. It's important to understand that every decision that's made at that table affects the classroom, affects the teacher's time, preparation, class size. It affects all those things. We have to solve the problem. We all want the best thing, but if they don't know how it affects the classroom, I know because I lived it for 25 years. I lived it as a teacher and as an administrator. I've lived that. I know what it feels like.
I think this is a question that really gets to what makes dysfunctional boards dysfunctional, because it's really not something that, in my opinion, that the board should be deciding in terms of if you need a 20-minute break, that should be something you could work out with your administration, with your principal. I think that the board has a role, the superintendent and the administration has a role, and I don't see where we should interject our thoughts into how you would go about getting the ample time you certainly deserve to have.
Personally, I think, sure, you should have definitely 40, 50 minutes of unencumbered time, but I do agree with what Joyce said. I think that it really should be a school-based decision, that your school-based leader should have that autonomy and that flexibility to work out what works for your school, what works for your classes. I know it's a little bit harder probably in elementary school than it might be in middle and high school. You certainly do need planning time, but I would say I think the board's role is, where the district needs to be going forward, future thinking, and that the time that you all are in your classroom or the time that you have unencumbered to work on other things should be left up to the school-based leaders, and I'm super confident that you all can work out what you need to have there. I'd like us to have more out-of-the-box options and not have the state mandate so many things. My nieces went to school in another state, and they got out early every Wednesday so teachers could have planning time. And I think there's lots of options out there that could be explored. Thanks.
So yes, I would just clearly say that I totally agree that this, as Joyce and Kate indicated, that this is something that can be worked out at the school-based level. Should teachers have this 20-minute encumbered time? Yes, it can be 30 minutes as long as they're working within the parameters of the school. This is something that's important. I think that quality time is needed. Teachers need a breather. Teachers need a refresher. Teachers need an opportunity to be able to enjoy their lunch on a daily basis and be able to have that breathing time. So I agree that 20 minutes or even 30 minutes, but it should be something that can be worked out at the school-based level to where this is something that can happen on a daily basis. Thank you.
Okay, we are getting to the end of our session tonight. We're going to skip down to the final question.
You asked questions. Do you want to increase pay and decrease classroom size? Should teachers get 20 minutes of free time? These softball questions are not debatable ideas. You spoke, all of you, about increasing the respect for the profession, and yet you have no accountability in these ideas. Can we actually ask something serious that you guys have some effect over? Because I think a lot of people here.
These questions were given by teachers.
I submitted questions as well.
Tell it to the teachers. This is what they wanted to know. This is what we prioritize, and this is what we want to hear. Let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at that. Well, do you want to be here till midnight because we had 63 questions?
Is that important?
All right. And they are welcome to stay afterwards if they would like to answer your questions. I think they would be glad to do that.
I'll stay all night.
But I don't think shouting from the seats is probably what you would want your students to do. So I think you should probably model behavior that's a little more appropriate for an auditorium.
Okay. Last question here, and then again, feel free to ask whatever questions you have personally of these folks as we finish up. Closing question. We've heard a couple of you say, we've heard all of you say, teachers make a difference in kids' lives. What teacher made a difference in your life? Why?
So, some of you may have heard me say this before, but I've said this in teacher settings before. I have two brothers. So I have two brothers and there's me. I have 27 nieces and nephews, grandnieces, grandnephews, and halves. My brothers don't date, they just go straight to the courthouse. Of those people, I have 4 that have actually graduated from high school. I am also the only one of my siblings that graduated from high school, much less went to college. This wasn't a very talked about thing in our home. So when I was in the 6th grade, I really thought, I was Kenny's little sister. They already knew I wasn't going to be there for about 3 more years anyway. And this is back when you would write your name on walls for sign-up sheets before computers. And so they put out all the sign-up sheets in the auditorium, and this is for the school newspaper. What do you want to be on the school newspaper? Reporter, whatever. So I looked at a list and I saw all the other kids who had signed up for all the other things, and I wrote down underneath the sports reporter. I had no idea, but there was only one other kid that had written that, so I hadn't assumed that I could possibly get the sports reporter job. And this teacher came to me, and this was back when they would pull you out. We had assemblies every morning back then. And I can't remember her name, but she wore 3-inch heels in the 70s. She had long red hair and always wore mini skirts. And she came and pulled me out of this auditorium. She had all these papers in her hands, and she said, Cindy, I've looked at these, and we've turned in everything, and we've looked at all the possible positions, and I really just don't think the sports reporter is quite the job for you. And she said, I think you were meant to be the editor-in-chief. And I can tell you that teacher changed my life and is the reason I went on to college.
Ms. Etta Wilson, my teacher in Liberty Hill Segregated Elementary School, could see me now. The teacher who knew every pair of socks that I had, who did not look at my socioeconomic, and I didn't know that word then, at that time. She loved me, and I knew she cared. The one who would call me out of the audience and have me sing in front of the whole school. The one who corrected my gullah to make sure that I could speak business English. The one who gave me those books from the other schools that had the other kids' names across the track. We couldn't even go to the regular library because we were not allowed. We were not good enough. But she made me feel that I was good enough. And then I was introduced to Mr. Curlew, my first Caucasian teacher in New York City, who had the audacity to see that I lied to him when I told him how much I had eaten for lunch, because I could walk home in New York. I didn't have half the things I told him. But in his wisdom and his compassion, he saw that I was really hungry. And he gave me something called a free lunch card. Never heard of in segregated South Carolina. And then Mr. Curlew wrote on my first report card, Linda is college material. Oh, if they could see me now. I've been on a constituent school board. I've taught at the Citadel. I've been a counselor at CSU. I'm getting ready to be on Charleston County School Board. If they could see me now. Thank you.
So the teacher that had the biggest impact on my life is Dot Shad, and that's my mother. It's the reason I'm running with my maiden name, Sarah Shad Johnson. My mother is a lifelong educator. She started her career here at Sanders Clyde Elementary. She was a third grade teacher forever at East Cooper School, actually till it closed in 1988, the year I graduated. She went from there to Trident Academy, where she taught students with learning disabilities. So everyone in town knows her. She's wonderful. She knows everything about education, and she's been behind me when my own children both have had IEPs 504s. When I had problems, when I had to file a civil rights lawsuit against the school district, she was there. She told me where to go to talk to an advocate. She got me through that. When I started my education group, she's in the education group. You'll see her in there. She's backing me. When I ran for school board, she's right there too. She's putting out signs for me. So, because she knows what's happening in our schools now is not what's supposed to be happening. We need to do more for the classroom, more for the kids, and it's high stakes testing just kind of ruined it all.
His name was Ludwig, Dr. Ludwig. He had a doctorate degree. He taught at our school because he was a draft dodger and he was sentenced to teach there. He taught me geometry, and he taught me something else because he was one of the first. He was from Argentina, he and his wife. And he was one of the first white people that ever spoke to me like I was human. And I learned a whole bunch of other stuff from him other than geometry, but I did learn geometry quite well.
I can tell you about my baseball coach in high school, but I've never been one to stick to a script, so I'll go off script a little bit. I am running for school board because I'm frustrated. I'm an educator. I'm a small family. This is not something that I'm like, yay, let's go do this. This is something I feel like we have to do. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated when I see all the money spent at the district office. I'm frustrated when I see these all this money spent on consultants and programs. I'm frustrated that we have special interest groups spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to influence a local school board race. I'm frustrated, and it needs to change. And so, and my promise to you is that I hold people accountable, and I hope that you hold me accountable as well, and you call me out if I'm not doing that. Thank you.
Again, thank you for having us here tonight. I had two great teachers in my life, and one was Miss LaPrince in the third grade at Murray Hill Elementary School, and Eugene Graves, who was a health teacher and a PE teacher at Barnes Wilson High School. Many of you may not know about that. But those teachers brought positiveness to the students. They had high expectations for us. That is what we need for our children, high expectations. If I don't think you can do anything, that transcends. I'm here tonight and wanting to be a part of your school board, our school board, because we need people to hold us accountable. We are about the education of children. Forget the bureaucracy. We're not here for that. We want to see that the teachers have what they need to provide our children, our grandchildren, with the best education possible so that our economy, our future, Charleston, South Carolina, can soar. I know that we can do this. My name is Vivian Pettigrew, and I'm asking you to support me for the Charleston County School Board.
I came to this country, my parents immigrated to the country when I was 5 years old. We left Cuba and came here, and my first school I went to was PS 99 in Flatbush. Now here was a little Cuban boy in a Jewish neighborhood, and I remember Miss Roth, my kindergarten teacher. I was scared to death. I didn't know the language, I didn't know anything. My parents were scared to death for me also, in a new country. And Miss Roth was wearing this big red dress, and I remember her taking me and cuddling with me and saying everything was going to be okay. Didn't know what she said to me, but just the way she reacted to me made it okay. She set my foundation for the next 12 years, just with a little touch of the back, pat of the back. Jake, I'm frustrated too. I understand how you feel, my friend. I do, I understand. But I do believe that there's a possibility that we can reach greatness in Charleston County. I believe that if we focus and work as a team, every child is reading on grade level. I can see that. See, I focus on what's possible, not what's broken. There's so many possibilities for Charleston County. And I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that person that kind of brings everybody together. We do need some education experience on that board. It's important, it's imperative for that to happen. Thank you, and I appreciate the time to come out here.
Well, the teacher who had the greatest impact on my life was my father. Obviously not a teacher, but he instilled in me the need to excel, to do well, to do better than he did. And so that was a lifelong foundational impact in my life. And then the second person was actually a teacher. The teacher was my first grade teacher, and she was very compassionate, she was soft-spoken, and I think that the thing most of all about her was she showed that she cared. She tried really hard to teach, and so she, to this day, will always be a star. Thank you.
My dad was in the Army for 22 years, so I'm an Army brat. So we moved all over the place, the United States. He was stationed in Germany. We would move during the middle of the year. So I went to multiple different schools. And I think the teacher that had the biggest impact on me and the most lasting impact was a 10th grade history teacher. His name was Mr. Young. And he really got us thinking critically. He challenged every student in the class all the time. It was an election year, and I spent a lot of time arguing with my father, who's very conservative, about politics and what was going on, and I don't think I would have ever have had that interest if it hadn't been for Mr. Young and the way he challenged everybody in our class. There are things that I do today, and that I think back and that he impacted me doing those. So thank you very much for having us here tonight. We really appreciate it.
I believe the greatest impact, or the first teacher in my life, was my mother, who talked about the importance of getting an education. Fast forward, and I believe my third grade teacher became to be the third or the second impact in my life, because she pushed reading and writing to the highest level. It was to the point to where she required that we read this different book every week. And not only did we have to read that book, but we had to write the entire content of that book by the end of the week. And we did that every week while I was in the 3rd grade. And from that point on, it got me to wanting to read and the ability to be able to write efficiently whenever my thoughts come together. And that was a great impact that helped me transcend throughout my school years. And then when I got to the 9th grade, I have to give credit to my senior Army instructor in the JRTC program, who started me with the leadership ability and the ability to be able to lead effectively. And that program taught me about leadership skill, and it brought what was internally inside of me on the outside on how to be a leader and the impact of being an effective leader, but first being a listener and a follower. So I give credit to my 3rd grade teacher in 9th grade. Thank you.
When I was in the 5th and 6th grade, things really started to fall apart for me. I had an undiagnosed learning disability. My parents divorced. My dad moved off to another state. And then I was sexually assaulted repeatedly by an older child. And by that time, I was in the 7th grade, and I wanted to burn the place down, to be honest with you. I couldn't think. I couldn't function. I was probably suspended 30 times. And they were ready to throw me out. And my mom went to the superintendent, and she asked for some help for me. Judy Freudberg, a psychologist, she came and tested me, and she said, this boy has PTSD, he has a learning disability, and we need to put him in a special class. That time it was called EH, emotionally handicapped. And Mr. Killian was the teacher in that class, and I don't remember the acronym or the fancy whatever training he had for what he did, but it was a combination of mental health and one-on-one teaching in a small class, and Mr. Killian saved my life.
Okay. Again, you're welcome to approach and ask them questions if you didn't feel like you got yours answered tonight. And again, don't let it stop here. Stay in contact with these people before the election and after the election. And that'll conclude tonight's forum. Thank you.
Earlier this year, researchers within the Clemson Office of Inclusion and Equity presented the results of their 6-month study to the CCSD board. Their findings showed that almost half of our 85 schools are overwhelmingly segregated, 18 schools are over 80% African American, and 17 schools are 80% Caucasian. As a board member, do you have any role in changing these policies? And if so, how would you go about doing that?
Yes, we do. The board has a huge impact on changing those policies. What we've started to do, we've got to looking at first some of our choice schools, the magnets and partial magnets, because there's huge disparities there. The other issue that came out in that report and in the accreditation report yesterday is that the county board doesn't have the authority over attendance lines, and that's a challenge. So I think that'll be something that we've got to look at. But I can't think of anything in that diversity report and those recommendations that we can't impact somehow. So I am working on it as we speak.
Might I ask you a question? What's more important, integrating the schools or teaching kids? Well, if I can, I would like to concentrate on integrating the schools, because it is a back and forth process to learn things. Like I learned what a meme was. I didn't know what that was. I did. I didn't know what a meme was. But the reality is the concentration should be on teaching at this point. If schools are community schools and they're equal, then it's not going to make a difference where you go. You integrate yourself into the schools. That's the best thing you can offer, because I can't force you to go. So why I want to do that?
So I'm kind of frustrated that there were 63 questions and not all of them were asked tonight. Why was there a timeline? Was there a certain timeline?
There was a 2-hour.
Because I will tell you that
we can talk about that afterwards.
School board member, we sometimes go till 1 a.m. to to get things answered and done for our kids. I just feel as though something important as this needs a little more time.
I would like to talk to you about the racial disparities issue. That came up in the QEP forum. I don't know if you were there. It was discussed more extensively there. We had several questions about that. And I don't know. I should stop, sorry.
So ask the question again.
So earlier this year, researchers with the Clemson Office of Inclusion and Equity presented the results of their 6-month study to the CCSD board. Their findings showed almost half of our 85 schools are overwhelmingly segregated. As defined, they said 18 schools are over 80% African American, and 17 schools are over 80% Caucasian. As a board member, would you have any role in changing these segregationist or these policies? And if so, how would you actually go about doing that?
Well, look, I happen to live in North Charleston, so every school you mentioned with over 80% is actually in the city I live in. And my city is more diverse than that. So we have a very interesting place in North Charleston where we love to live together, we worship together, we go to the same restaurants, and then we don't go to the same schools. And I spend all of my time having that conversation. I have elementary schools that are at capacity, and then an exodus in the 6th grade. And then I have under capacity high schools. And our job as board members is to bridge that gap and say, parents, you don't mind living here, you don't mind working here, you don't mind going here. Let's talk about the fact that the board can deny those voluntary transfers. And I think that for a while, there were board members that absolutely said, if a parent wants to go to a different school, you're going to let them go to that different school. We're going to approve every single voluntary transfer because that's what the parents want. And you can't educate a family or a district if you take an entire city and pick it up at 8 o'clock and transfer it to Wando, and then at 3 in the afternoon pour it back out. The board cannot do attendance zone lines, but they can work on the voluntary transfer policies and certainly work on the magnet school things, such as the top 2 kids in Northwoods and Morningside and Zucker being offered a seat in those schools.
What about academic magnet?
That's the top 2.
Could I?
School right there in North Charleston. Why isn't it a priority instead of busing those kids out to make room there for those kids?
That's what I was talking about with the top 2. We now take the top 2 students.
Right now, why don't you make it a priority and set a goal for that?
No, that is an actual policy we made. That did happen.
In 2004,
Continue to have those kids. I can tell you, I want the 2 kids at Montessori, 6 blocks from my house on this way, or Hersey, I call it the Montessori. I want them in that school. And we said, you get a seat in that school and you're not part of that population. There are actual seats set aside. That is what I want to see, is all of those kids in North Charleston walking across to the SOA instead of going to North Charleston Creative Arts and then going somewhere else for their middle and high school. I very much am into that because they're my neighbors.
I'd like to address that because in 2014 I co-chaired a committee with Ann Birdseye, and we presented 6 pages of recommendations to change that at Academic Magnet and at School of the Arts, at Montessori Community School, to provide opportunities for having kids. I was over access and opportunity. As of this date, only 1 of those suggestions has been taken into place, the top 2. Okay? Exactly. And we had a group of people, the schools want to do it, it just takes courage. You've got to have courage, and your board's got to be willing to make those tough decisions. And until we have the courage to make those tough decisions, we're going to continue having these kind of schools that are segregated.
One thing I don't know that people realize with the Academic Magnet, if you've lived here for a long time, there was a time when it was much more diverse than it is now, and somebody sued.
Larry Kabrowski, call him.
Sued the district, and so changed the way that we could handle that admission. So we are working on right now, knowing what we know from that lawsuit and how we had to change things. What are other things? How can we change the admission process? We have more kids apply to SOA than any other
SOAs. I wanted to put a Boost in Mount Pleasant, and then those kids would go to that version of Boost. Downtown would go to that version of Boost. That's the best way.
But listen, guys, the real thing behind this is we're in a society that was developed over 400 years of slavery, racial terrorism, bracketed and white supremacy. And our policies are still bound to those ideas. And until we confront those head on as a society and as individuals, we're not going to be able to implement specific policies. Because every time we do, some group comes and sues us, and they can't let us do things like say, hey, we want 40% of the black kids in that community in that school, no matter what. And they sue us and they don't let us do it. So
this school is an excellent example of a working school. It's the best example we've got. You need to do this. You don't have to get all fancy. We can do just what's being done right here.
Yeah, and I'll just say something since they're talking about constituent boards and student transfers. That's what we do. In District 2, that's Mount Pleasant area, Mount Pleasant schools. We get over 350 student transfer requests from District 2 and from everywhere else in Charleston County to people that want to leave their schools. Most of them we deny unless it's like an extreme hardship. So the CCSD and the constituent board, we have revised the student transfer policy so it's not just freedom. Everyone can go to whatever school they want. So what happens is the neighborhood school is left behind. So my focus is the neighborhood school. Some of the charter schools, the East Cooper Montessori Charter is located in Mount Pleasant as well. They are not diverse at all. The African American population was 1%. They're up to 5%. It's slow steps, but it's about transportation. Why is it so difficult for everyone to get to that school? Transportation, school choice information. So there are a lot of different moving pieces to do it, but we unfortunately school choice has had a very negative effect on our neighborhood schools.
Can I ask a question about the 10-day count? So the last time I checked, we continue to take students after the 10-day count. We don't shut the door on them. What I would like to know, with 40 to 50 people moving to the Tri-County area every day, why do we put a halt on hiring when our class sizes exceed the max after the 10-day count, but it's not worked into the budget? I guess my question is, would you make adjustments to the budget to allow for hiring throughout the year, no matter when it happens? Yes. I mean, we are constantly growing.
I mean, being a former principal, begging for like one student to come on that 9th or 10th day, and if we don't get that, the class sizes are stuck really high, and then the next day after the next weekend we get 4 or 5 more, and then by Christmas the class sizes are enormous. But the answer is because the school board doesn't know. I mean, they haven't been there. They don't understand what that's like, and they don't understand that this piece of paper that they're approving does not have room for adjustment in there. And so, yes, that needs to be a standard part of the policy to do that. And they will do it, and there have been cases where they've done it, but it's got to far, far, far exceed. Right. And it shouldn't have to far, far, far exceed.
I mean, it's no question that we are growing. There's a neighborhood in our district growing.
Exactly.
Building 90 new houses.
Yeah.
In our school district right now. It's on James Island.
Yeah, so there was one year where we got about 35 or 40 new students after Christmas. Yeah. And that was much lower than some other schools, but there was no increase in allocations or support for that, so that's tough.